Started here. So, first of all, thank you all so much for coming out. This is obviously a really important topic, and it takes a community. And it's not something that you study and do once and you're done, but it's continual. And the goal for tonight is really to come together as a community to talk about the work that ACSD is doing, both with students and with the community at large. And then we're going to finish after hearing a few presentations. We'll be talking about, at tables, we'll be talking about safety, and you'll have someone at your table, an administrator at your table, taking information and helping to facilitate a conversation. We'll also be hearing from Rob Evans, who is our school safety liaison for Vermont. I will talk about him and introduce him in 1 second. So again, thank you for being here. There's our agenda. So I think it's important before we begin to really kind of acknowledge our world and the changing shape of school safety. And for those of you that graduated from high school in the 80s and 90s, the world has changed a lot since then. And even in my tenure as an administrator over the last 15 years, I've seen significant change in the schools that I've been in and nationally, and looking at the trends of what's happening. You may know that in terms of school safety and response, what once seemed like best practice even 15 years ago now has shifted and changed, and as we learn more about response to school shootings, to active shooters, we have started to change our practices to be more responsive. We know that it takes a community to keep everybody safe, and it's really scary to think about when we're inundated in the media with tales and tales and tales of school shootings in different places. Oftentimes we think in Vermont we're somehow isolated and insulated. And to be honest, I felt that way in moving here. Living in Oregon in a larger city and coming to Vermont, I felt more of that kind of safety here. It felt like with our strong community involvement, with our connection with each other, that it somehow feels different. But I think we have to recognize that over the last couple of years, in Fairhaven, in Essex, in South Burlington, and then recently here, and other places too, this is not something that happens elsewhere. It also is something that is real. It could happen anywhere. And we, as a school district, take that really, really seriously. We have been working on that prior to events that happened this year, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the work that we're doing. That started about 2 years ago in working on enhanced responses that are different from our traditional ones. One of the other things I wanted to mention, which I think is really important, is that we're responsible for student safety, but we're also responsible for creating a learning environment that supports creativity, that supports openness, that supports empathy. So there's a balance in this work too. And those of you that have been reading recently about what's happening in other places can see that there are some school districts that will go 100,000 miles an hour in this direction and fortify. And we have to balance. Our safety is an absolute priority, but we also have to have a priority of having a learning environment that students feel comfortable in and safe in and accepted within. And so that's part of the balance, I think, as we move forward and as we continue to pursue best practices, and Rob will be talking about those in a moment, that we be mindful of that as well. So with that, I'm going to let Rob talk a little bit about what's happening in Vermont. Rob works with school districts throughout the state, has a wealth of information, He was really helpful to us during the mum's incident in December, and I'm really grateful for him being here. So let's welcome him.
I'm going to try to go without the microphone. Can everybody hear me okay? Is that all right? Again, my name is Rob Evans, and I'm the School Safety Liaison Officer for Vermont's Agency of Education and Department of Public Safety. I've been doing this job for about the past 5.5 years. I want to frame up my context of the conversation. Probably most importantly, I come to you as a parent of 3 children who grew up in a public school system in the Essex Junction area. And I, like Peter, thought that this was an area where I could grow and raise a family in a safe, secure educational environment. I also come to you after spending 23 years with the Vermont State Police, policing the rural and urban areas of Vermont and understanding the changing landscape in safety and security as a state, and not just in all of our schools and communities across the state. And I also come to you after being a first responder to the Essex Elementary School shooting, where I led the tactical team during that day. And again, my kids were a part of that school system, so I come after having experienced that not only as a police officer, but as a parent of 3 children that had to deal with the impacts of a violent confrontation like that in our school system. So I truly get it, but I also very much appreciate that your priority and the school's priority is to educate. And I wish that we all could focus specifically on that, but unfortunately safety and security is paramount. But we also know that the research and analysis will show and tells us that if kids don't feel safe and secure in their environments, they aren't learning. I also very much appreciate an open and welcoming educational environment. And I am not a proponent for making our schools and education facilities look like correctional facilities. There are ways that we can go about achieving the safety and security things that we want without making it look like there's a police officer at every door, we have metal detectors and concertina wire moats with alligators and that type of thing. With security technology solutions and an open and positive school culture and climate, good collaborations with our local police departments and that type of thing, we can achieve the things that we are looking to achieve. But it starts with a community conversation like this. Not just post-incident, not just pre-incident, but as you said, it takes a community. It takes eyes and ears in our communities, and we all have a role to play. Not just our kids, not just our faculty and staff, not just our police officers, but every single member of our community has a role to play in safety and security. This process in the state didn't just start 5 or 6 years ago. It didn't just start after the Essex Elementary School shooting. It actually started back in 1999 in the community of Essex, when then the Chief of Police, Leo Naidu, thought that there was a need to build a partnership with the community members that would enhance the level of school safety and security in that community. And he brought together school administrators, first responders, parents, kids together to talk about how do we move the process along to enhance emergency preparedness in schools in that community across the state, which formalized the process of the Vermont School Crisis Planning Team, which was a state, continues to be a state-level team of school safety partners, Vermont Department of Health, mental health professionals, the Red Cross, Department of Public Safety, Agency of Education, school superintendents and principals associations. Probably 25 or 30 folks sit around the table every single month and talk about how do we better do what we're trying to do from a safety and security perspective. In 2016, the Secretary of Education and Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety really saw the need to formalize that process and develop what we call the Vermont School Safety Center, which really is kind of a one-stop shop for everything related to school safety and security, where somebody can go if they have a training resource or an equipment resource or maybe a best practice about access control or visitor management or acceptable use of security camera policy. You can go to that site, and there are resources like Sonny and myself that folks can talk to about how do we get better at doing things. the Fairhaven incident comes along, and then there is a significant push to do something at the state level as far as emergency preparedness is concerned. There was a significant financial investment that the governor's office made in deploying or putting out about $4.5 million of safety and security infrastructure. But I want Sunny to talk a little bit about those initiatives, where the money has gone, and what we hope to do in the future for additional funding for schools across Vermont. So, Sunny.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sunny Harrison. I am the school safety program manager for the Emergency Management. Mostly with Rob. I can't hear you. So everyone, I'm Sunny Harrison. I work with the Emergency Management, and I work closely with Rob with the Vermont School Safety Center, and I am the manager of all of the school safety grants. And so I do a little overview over those. I'm sure you're all familiar with the $4 million appropriation that Governor Scott put out last year for infrastructure developments and enhancements for schools. We awarded 560 projects throughout Vermont. We had a really high rate of applications. I'm sorry, can you give me a raise? Is that okay? Can you hear me?
No, there.
Oh, you turned me up. All right, sorry. So we had 560 projects that were awarded to 260 schools throughout Vermont. We are starting to see the projects up and running. There are a small number completed right now, but we know that there's a large number that are waiting for the summer break to let contractors into the schools. We've heard from several supervisory unions that there's concern about having the student body in the school if there's contractors, because then you need to run the background check on the contractors. So there's a lot of schools that are waiting for summer break to get those projects up and running. I thought I'd give you a quick snapshot of the top 5 project enhancements, so you sort of have an idea of what's being awarded out there. And the top 5 are the exterior door lock upgrades, mass notification systems, new doors and windows, exterior and interior security cameras, and interior lock upgrades. Each of those, we also have a person, as Rob mentioned, the school crisis planning team. We have an individual, a member on that team that represents the Division of Fire Safety, and he is checking in with each of those projects as they're being completed to make sure that they are up to code and in compliance with fire safety in each of the schools. So we're really excited to have those projects moving forward. It's providing resilience in our schools while not making them sort of correctional institutions. And we're really happy to see those moving forward. Right now we've awarded so this is a reimbursement grant, and we've reimbursed $617,000 of the almost $4 million. So you can see that it's not quite up and running, at full speed, but that will be quickly progressing as summer comes. We also have a grant that's going to be offering planning, training, and exercising resources to schools throughout Vermont. We have a contract that has been finalized, and so there's going to be a resource that schools will be contacted through this vendor to see what their needs are. They can help with emergency operations plans, developing training exercises, and actually going through the exercises with the schools. That's going to be something that's going to be rolled out at the end of the spring, so you can watch for some outreach from us. I really suggest you guys reach out for those resources. It's going to be really valuable to your school communities.
So let me just try to one of the things that we have heard statewide is a capacity issue. Who at the school, who at the supervisory union or the school district has the knowledge, skills, and abilities to do this emergency operations planning and developing comprehensive emergency operations plans? Who's going to do that while we're still trying to educate our kids? And that's why there was a need to provide a professional contractor to come in and assist schools to do that. We also understand it's a capacity as far as 1/3 of our principals and superintendents every single year change positions and change school systems and change school districts. So we understand that we continually have to go out and provide those types of services as well. If you take a look at some of the handouts that you have in front of you, one of them is a highlight of the Governor's School Safety Conference that we had back in the November-December timeframe of last year. That's actually a conference we've been doing for the last 6 or 7 years. We had about 350 school safety partners that attended that, and we were blessed to have the Assistant Director of the FBI come to Vermont and talk about school emergency preparedness and kind of the national trends and the 30,000-foot view of where we're going with school emergency preparedness. And I can tell you, I was thankful that the majority of the things that he spoke about, we either had programs in place for that or were beginning to put programs in place for that. Something like enhancing our See Something, Say Something campaign, which I know you will talk about a little bit later. Enhancing our behavioral threat assessment process so that we can identify these threats to our schools prior to a critical incident taking place. And if you look at the research and analysis of these past active shooter incidents, what we know is in almost every single incident, there is a bit of leakage that takes place prior to the incident happening, meaning that someone had said something about something that they were going to do. And if we had put the pieces of the puzzle together and someone had come to a trusted advisor at school or talked with a coach, or if a friend had heard something about that and talked to a parent, and the parent had talked to law enforcement, that maybe, just maybe, we could have stopped these incidents before they took place. And if I had $1 to spend on emergency preparedness and school safety, I would much rather spend 75 cents on that dollar on prevention and 25 cents of that dollar on response and recovery from those traumatic incidents. And we know that we've gotten success from that. And that's why we are trying to enhance those programs across Vermont. One of the other initiatives that we applied for and received a Department of Justice grant for about $250,000 to $300,000, I think, was to develop a comprehensive school safety anonymous tip line. At the state level, that would be answered 24 hours a day by Department of Public Safety dispatch and professionals, so that if a tip comes in, credibility is there and the information needs to be actioned right now to stop an event from taking place. That 24 hours a day, community members, students, school staff, principals and superintendents, law enforcement can call, and we can begin to put those pieces of the puzzle together to try to, again, prevent those things from happening. One final thing that, again, we got a Department of Justice grant to push out to not only schools but communities across this state is a program we call Survive Vermont, which blends 3 programs together: the See Something, Say Something campaign, the Stop the Bleed campaign, as well as the Run, Hide, Fight campaign, which talks about options-based response protocols, which I know you folks will talk about in just a minute. But I won't steal any thunder to that program, but I will just tell you this, that the traditional lockdown configuration of what we used to do pre-Columbine, for a year or two after the Columbine shooting took place, is when law enforcement got called to these types of critical incidents, we would take this isolate it, contain it, and negotiate type of methodology where we would isolate the scene, try to contain it, try to either negotiate our way out of it or wait for SWAT team members to get there and make the entries to try to mitigate the threat inside. And we know that at Columbine and in other incidents, if we're going to wait for resources to get there, then the only people with the guns are the bad folks inside the walls of our school with those guns. So we know we have to take additional protective measures to not only protect our students, but the faculty and staff as well inside the school. And what I mean by options-based responses is we have to give folks options, individual life-saving decisions that can be made based upon situational awareness about what's happening around you. And so that what's happening in the west side of a school building may mean that we have to take one type of response action, but what's happening in the east side of the building or in another wing of the school may mean that we have to take another type of response methodology. And I know that those are difficult conversations, and empowering folks to make those individual life-saving decisions are difficult, but we have to have them because we know what we were doing before is problematic for a lot of folks in these types of situations. So it's all about providing options about how we're going to respond to these types of things. So I got to tell you, again, I think we all should feel blessed that we've got a governor that sees this as an important topic. We've got a Secretary of Education and a Commissioner of Public Safety that are committing resources, both financially and personnel, to enhance school emergency preparedness. And in a community like this, where you've got this many folks sitting in a room, and you you've got an active PD and school resource officers in your schools. This is not the norm. As I travel across the state, folks are really, really stretched for resources. We maybe have 35 or 40 full-time school resource officers in the 400 plus schools we have in our state. So to look around and see uniforms and collaborations and first name basis of officers sitting around the table with principals and superintendents and faculty and staff, you're way ahead of the power curve than what's the norm across the state right now. I see that as a really, really good thing. My resources that I provide, as we did and will continue to do, if there's a problem, I am an available resource that folks can call and bounce off ideas, talk about what's the best practice based upon all of our experience and exposure to these types of incidents. And if I need to get here, I can get here to provide those types of resources as well. It's a resource that's going to continue, and it's a resource that I know Vermont Emergency Management will continue to support with their financial resources as well. I'll kind of close off this portion of the conversation. Do you want to take questions now, or do you want to stay there? Questions, concerns about kind of the state of the state and where we're going on school preparedness?
And we'll have more time to talk, so if things kind of percolate over the next hour, we'll have time to talk again. Did you finish what you were going to say?
Yeah, I think that's better. So the other thing that I just needed to really get to is that there is right now currently at the legislature. Sorry. Okay. I just wanted to mention that at the legislature right now in the Capitol bill there is $1.4 or $5 million set aside to continue the school safety improvements. Hopefully that makes it through to the final bill, but if it does, there will be a new application process. All of the schools will be able to apply again to try to strengthen and make their schools more resilient. So that's just something to keep your eyes open for. And certainly if anyone has any questions on the grants, I have my cards and I'm available by phone or on the website. Reach out to me, I'd be happy to help.
Sonny, one of the challenges we had with that last $4 million was because of a statute requirement, the majority of that funding got spent on just public schools. So you can imagine the hue and cry from the private and independent schools when they did get access to some of that additional funding. We're not so sure where that additional 1.5 is going to go, if it's going to be prioritized to private and independents, or it's going to be everybody's going to get access to that funding for the future. We're just going to have to wait to see what the legislative session does.
Thank you, everybody.
There, can you hear me now? Hi, I'm Vicki Wells. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Student Services, and I wanted to share with you what the rest of the night is going to look like. We're going to spend about 15 minutes, and Amy Piper, who is the Dean of Students at the middle school, is going to talk in depth about the ALICE protocol, which is it's a response to an active shooter and what we are now being trained on. Then we have Elizabeth Burrows and Brooke Jetty that are going to speak to you about the Say Something program. So we're going to do reactive, and then we're going to look at the proactive. Then you will have an opportunity as groups around tables to answer some questions and give us some guidance as well. So I wanted to share, Peter had said we had started this process a long time ago. In terms of ALICE, and for those that don't know, and you'll hear more about it coming up, it stands for, the acronym is for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And Amy will give you more information on that. But in terms of the timeline, we did 2 years ago in February, I was the first administrator trained in ALICE, in the ALICE protocol, and it was a trainer of trainers, so I was able to then come back to our district and train our staff in the ALICE protocol. We did some initial planning after I was trained, and then we had several other individuals, other administrators within the district, along with, at the time, Officer Mason was here, and he's been trained in the ALICE protocol. And so we've been working with Middlebury Police in working through the training. So again, additional trainers were trained in the spring and the summer of 2018, and this past fall, we trained all of our faculty and staff between the first day of school, or between before school started and November on the ALICE protocol. And that was a combination of an online as well as in-person training. So I'm going to introduce Amy, have her come on up, and she's going to walk you through the ALICE protocol.
Okay, thanks, Vicki. So my name is Amy Piper, as Vicki mentioned, and this is only my second year as the Dean of Students, and before I became the Dean of Students at the middle school, I was a special educator for 25 years. Yes, I look very young. So in that time, oftentimes students would come to me, and they would be in 7th grade, and it would be my responsibility to figure out what they needed to do to be able to learn to read or to improve their math skills or writing skills. And I wouldn't take everything that they had learned over those past 6 or 7 years before they came to me and toss it out the window. I would really carefully try to figure out what is it they already know and what foundation has already been built. And I feel like ALICE kind of does that. So instead of talking about teaching reading to you tonight, I will be talking a little bit about a protocol that really focuses on building on the strengths that we already have, learning from the data that we've been studying in order to put something into practice that really is best practice. And to me, when you think about a best practice, you're looking for something that really meets the needs of a specific situation. And ALICE was really designed to meet the needs of a very scary but very specific situation. So let's take a look at some details to learn a little bit more about what ALICE means and some of the information too that we'll be sharing with students when we go to teach them about this protocol. So first of all, police, as we know, are dedicated to protecting and helping others. And they have a huge responsibility, and in our district, a very wide, large area to cover. And when you think about an active shooter incident, that incident can begin and end in a matter of minutes, oftentimes before the police even arrive. So the first responders in these events are really us as the educators and the students and all of the people that are within the building at that particular moment. So those first responders need to have an opportunity to think about what are the steps that they can take to keep others safe and themselves safe. So the beauty of ALICE is it really provides lots of different options for response. Even though it has a specific acronym, those letters stand for specific, and basically specific different things that students can do and adults can do in any order. So with the idea being to keep as many people safe as possible, we're really looking for a flexible protocol that, depending on the situation, can adapt to it. So we think about enhanced response. We think about that idea of really a new standard of care. So when you take a look at this graph, you can see that over the years, as Dr. Rose referred to, the world in which we live has changed. And the number of active shooter incidents has steadily risen, not just in schools, but across different community places. When we think about the news, we've heard about events at hospitals, movie theaters, other places where you have large groups of people. So the FBI has really been able to take all of the data that's been collected from all these different incidents across the United States and try to look for patterns and try to figure out some different common pieces of information that could be used to figure out a better way to respond. And as Dr. Rose had mentioned, you know, these events can really happen anywhere, anytime, any place, for any reason. So you need a protocol that is very flexible, that can bend and meld depending on the situation. So the difficulty that we have with the lockdown is the fact that it's a single response. And when you have only one way of doing something, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. Just like teaching reading, there's hundreds of different ways to teach a child to read. And there's all different ways that work differently for different kids. So ALICE kind of fits that, is it gives us multiple response options. So our current approach that we have really doesn't allow for that. And if we think about police who are trained in their, with their skills, they have only 34% accuracy when it comes to reaching a target. But because of the system with lockdown, it takes an intruder and increases their opportunity. So now all of a sudden, even though they're very untrained, they have a very scary 96% accuracy. So with the FBI study, they said, okay, the first thing we need to do is tip that in the other direction. So I inserted some slides that I saw from our training, and so you can see these, they're kind of modeled like this with black and white coloring, but it does a little review for students and for the community as well. So if we take a look, ALICE training basically is an acronym, and it's a response that's based on proactive strategies. A standing for alert, L for lockdown, I inform, C counter, and E evacuate. And it's not meant to be sequential. Any of those strategies can be used at any time in any order. So when we think about ALICE, when we think about best practices, and we think about what parts of ALICE make it seem like a good fit for this particular situation when responding to active shooter events, we have to consider the following different indicators. First of all, ALICE strategies are supported not just by a specific district, but federal, state, and local governments all across the United States, as well as law enforcement. So people with a lot of expertise in this area have found that this is a good fit to help protect and keep people safe. The acronym itself makes it easy to remember, so you can teach it to children of all ages. Also, research shows that ALICE-trained schools who have encountered an active shooter event suffered fewer fatalities. And so far, 13 ALICE-trained facilities, there have been 0 fatalities, which to me is very impressive, because that's our goal, is to protect every child, every person in that building to the greatest degree possible. So the Vermont School Crisis Planning Team researched a variety of different response models that are currently being used, and one of the ones that was most widely selected was ALICE. So we'll talk a little bit, just briefly, about some of the information that we would share with students when we go to teach them about this model. So we would teach them that when you go to alert somebody, alerts can come from any direction, and it's basically a way of defining something that you know isn't quite right. So it could be something really scary like gunfire, or it could just be someone seeing something, an announcement that comes over the loudspeaker, a text message or a phone alert that's received from the teacher within the classroom. So the idea being, the sooner you know something isn't right, the faster you can alert others and then start to think about what's the safest response. So the key ideas that we try to teach students is that alert is plain language. You're going to see what you say. We're not going to use any codes with kids. When we do our ALICE drills, we'll say we are now going to have an ALICE drill. We let everyone know well in advance, and then we would just say something like initiate ALICE drill, alert, and then we would remind them that alerts can come from anywhere, so we would practice different ways of giving information. And then it gives students and teachers an opportunity to take the information that they've been given and then determine a response. L refers to lockdown, and a lockdown is always a good start. It's a way of saying, okay, if I need to stay in my space, then what's the safest way to stay here? So if you decide, one of the key ideas, I'll just read this quickly, if you decide not to evacuate, secure the room and never go into lockdown without a barricade. So the idea here is that if you have to lock down because you hear gunfire, you're not exactly sure if it's safe to leave, then you want to make that room as safe as possible. So some things that we would teach kids are to lock the door, to cover the windows in the door if possible, to tie down the door. Kids are very creative. I'm sure they'll have a lot of different ideas. And using whatever materials are handy to barricade the door. Classrooms are great for that. There's lots of filing cabinets and chairs and tables. So anything that they can do to put distance and make it harder for that person to get into that room is the basic idea. You can also, depending on a lot of our buildings, they're only 1 story high, look for alternative escape routes. We would teach kids to pay attention and to the surroundings. Someone in the room would call 911, move out of the doorway, teach kids to move away from the doorway in case something unsafe comes through it. And the idea being spreading around the room and try to hide in a location where the wall might be thicker or away from windows. So the idea is, while kids are doing this, they're busy sort of, instead of, they're still scared, but they're also taking action to sort of protect themselves, protect each other. It gives them an opportunity to stay safe and to also have time to talk with each other to continue to develop a plan. Okay, I refers to inform. So this refers to the idea of, once you have some information, you want to be able to pass that information along as much as possible. So you would use plain language again, seeing or saying what you hear. Information from 911 calls, video surveillance, eyewitness, etc. So outside of that space or outside of that area of the building where the unsafe situation is occurring, there's information being gathered. We would teach kids to focus on sort of who, what, where, when, why, how, the basics of what they were able to gather. And then it can be used by people in the area to make decisions. That information can be sent in a variety of different ways. And the goal is to communicate the violent intruder's location and direction in real time to others outside their location. So kids might say something like, I saw a person wearing a black hoodie. Another person might say, oh, and then 2 classrooms down might add information, carrying a gun, going toward the cafeteria. So in summary, in form, we would talk to kids about, no codes, just paying attention to be alert, providing any information that they might notice, and it allows for good decision making. So kids can continue to exercise an option. So they're thinking about whether they need to lock down, stay in place, put their barricade in place, or thinking about, if the incident's happening on the other side of the building, then the safest route for them is going to be to evacuate. C represents counter. So counter really is meant to always be the very last resort. You would want to put as much distance or stuff between you and the dangerous person. And in this case, we understand that it's not for every age student. Not every single student in our building is going to be taught to counter. That's not what the expectation is. This is really more to be a proactive strategy when the person has kind of gotten through the barricade and there's very few options. We want to be able to distract them. So the idea for countering is not really to try to fight them in any way. It's not fighting at all. It really comes about the idea of distraction. So I'm going to pause here just for a second and give you a quick neuroscience lesson. So all good teachers know, when you have a room full of kids, you need to get their attention quickly. Each one of them kind of have their own thought patterns in that moment, their own piece of information that they're focusing on or distracted by. And we can think about that. It's kind of referred to as an OODA loop. So they have this little loop going around in their head, and you want to get all the loops going around in their head, but all focused on you and what you're about to teach them. So you need to do something to gather their attention. Well, when this idea of an unsafe person breaks into a room, they have their OODA loop too going around in their head with what their plan is that they're going to do. So we try to teach kids to distract them. So maybe someone might scream, someone might throw something, and if you have a room full of kids and you have them doing all these unexpected things in different ways, then it's going to disrupt that thought pattern, and oftentimes that's just enough time for the person to become disoriented and not be able to follow through with what their original plan was. So the focus that we really will talk to kids more about is definitely not fighting, but more about noise, movement, distance, distraction, throwing things, anything to kind of disrupt their thinking. And the idea being, create as much noise as possible, run around the room, create chaos, and evacuate if possible. Because the other piece is the door's been opened. So if the person's coming into the room and there's enough distraction, we might be able to get the kids right out the door. And then for older kids, and depending on the situation, you could also consider swarming the distracted shooter or grabbing at them, with the idea being to get them down on the ground if possible. And the last slide that we're going to talk a little bit about is E for evacuate. And evacuate really is exactly what it says. It's removing yourself from that unsafe situation. So depending on the location of the intruder, oftentimes you always first try to get kids away from that unsafe place as much as possible. So if it's in a different part of the building, you may decide evacuate is the best option. We teach kids to run in a zigzag pattern fast as they can and never go near the danger zone. Never carry anything in your hands. Stop running. Don't stop running until you reach the assigned rally point. Rally points are going to be determined sort of by each building with administrators and teachers. And that would be like the safe place that parents would go to pick up their child. We would talk about maybe breaking out windows, attempting to clear glass from the frame if you are on a first-story building. The primary goal is to basically find a safe place where adults are, and a safe place, and adults will determine rally points, that if the rally point can be reached safely. Following all directions given by police, and do not attempt to drive away if you're older students. So I think that I just kind of added that to the slide, thinking about high school students, that imagine the car parking lot with all of a sudden 100 kids in their cars trying to drive away at the same time. Not a good situation. I think as you think about Alice, I know that I gave you a lot of information in a very short period of time. But as we look around this room, you know, we're all parts of families, and we're educators, we help our kids, we take care of each other, we take care of our students at school. I think it's important to think about, you know, best practice really comes down to thinking about what we can do to sort of help each other. And whenever there's a difficult situation, we all kind of pull together. And I think Alice is a good fit for us because it gives us that opportunity to pull together, to use the information we have, to make good choices, and to try to keep everybody safe. So we'll be available at the end if anyone has any specific questions about the protocol. Thank you.
And again, the Alice protocol is very different than our typical lockdown, because you heard from Rob and from Dr. Burrows what can typically happen in a lockdown situation where the active shooter, instead of a trained shooter, an active shooter who's not trained, was at 96% accuracy, and we want to disrupt that as much as we possibly can. So I now want to introduce Brooke Jetty and Elizabeth Burrows, who are going to talk to you about the Say Something program, which is a proactive program.
So we really do get the best part of this evening, which is really about hope. It's about what everyone's talked about, caring for one another, and building our community in many different ways, through family, through our coaches, through our teachers. There's just so many things that we could be doing more of. I think we do really well as a community, and it's really building on the strengths that we have. So I'm going to let you introduce.
I want to start by acknowledging what Vicki said, that this is definitely a proactive program. I think even more importantly, what's happening in our schools every day is our students have a really strong sense of belonging. They are developing strong relationships with one another, with their teachers, with their administrators. You as parents are here tonight, you're in our schools, and we know from research that that's actually the most important thing we can do. Also, I'm one of your elementary school counselors, and when I see, I'm in 3 of them, Waybridge, Bridgeport, and Shoreham, but I know across our district at the elementary level, the kids are learning the skills they need to solve problems, know how their feelings, know how to communicate with others, to self-regulate, all those things that ultimately will prevent problems like violence. So I'm new to the district. I came from Boulder most recently, and we led this program in our schools after the Parkland tragedy. And our kids were so empowered and led this program, and that will be our intention here. This program was started by parents who lost their children at Sandy Hook Promise, and what they have done since then is establish many programs like Start With Hello, which is about making sure that every student has a friend in school, to programs like See Something, Say Something, They have focused on violence prevention, but also on mental health, and this program really supports all those things. Okay. So as Rob mentioned earlier, in most situations, kids who are thinking about hurting someone or themselves speak up. And we know, we were all teenagers, and we know the culture of teenagers is we don't tell each other, or we don't tell adults. We keep it to ourselves, we tell each other, and we might even keep it a secret. So this program really teaches kids that the right thing to do is to say something. If you have any concerns, give it to the adults, and the adults will take care of it. So this is sort of a repeat, but essentially what the kids are going to be learning is what are the warning signs I need to look for, and when do I need to get help from someone. And also to echo what Amy was saying, I think this program is really powerful because we all might feel afraid. We might worry about school violence in the aftermath of what happened at MUMS. We also know that tragedy, potential tragedy, was averted because kids did say something. And so again, this program, and I was glad to hear, I didn't recognize that through the Vermont School Safety Committee, they are endorsing this program because I think it really can work.
To piggyback on what you just said, I think that we've done the same thing here when we've seen students have seen something on social media, they've spoken up, and that's before we even started the trainings. And I think a lot of what we see play out is through social media. And a lot of times what we need to really help our youth with, and you as parents and educators can be doing this, is recognizing what's happening for them in their online life. And it's harder as they get older, but to be checking in with them and taking this seriously about what people put out. And what we see at the high school level is students might make things a little bit light. So they might put out a threat, but just say, no, I'm just joking. And it's gotten to a point where we really need to be doing better education with students about not making light of what is said and what they say. And that's going to be part of both what we're doing in terms of potential threats to others and then also to ourselves. And really raising awareness around mental health. And Sean Farrell and the MAP group at the high school is going to be working on a campaign. Are you guys doing it this year? So, and it's going to be talking about mental health and normalizing that conversation so that we're not really joking about it, but we're taking it seriously and we're talking with each other. And so the other piece too about creating this culture is making sure that we have implemented the steps that need to happen. So really acknowledging what the issues are, and I think there's always room for school culture, and I'm always going to be talking from a high school perspective. And we do a really good job with that. We have really great clubs, really great inclusion. We just had 2 basketball games with just great success where the community came together with everybody. We have many opportunities to build on this. And then the care piece is huge. So you as parents caring for your kids' friends. So bringing people into your home, checking in with them, because you might be that adult for them, not their parents. And oftentimes this is just a parenting class that I took that was great advice. The best advice was just to listen. You don't have to fix the problem, but just be that sounding board. So again, it's really just being aware of what's going on in our community. I don't know if you want to talk more on this slide, but I think to keep us all safe, this program, to see something, say something, really pertains to from a very young age to up through high school. And it brings me back to when my son was in 6th grade, and he had just received an iPod. And so he was always texting his friends. It was pretty new back then. I think it was maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And as a parent, I was checking what they were doing and found that they were really doing a nice job caring for each other, but they were doing it in isolation. So I think what we can be doing with that through technology as parents is checking as much as we can developmentally as they're going up, and you can get on their phones and their devices and look. Because sometimes they're policing things independently and they need our help. So as much as you can be checking in is really important.
So what's going to be happening in our schools is Brooke and I are going to be working with Sean and Kate, who's here, and other staff at the high school to find students who want to be peer leaders. And from likely 6th grade up, which is 5th, 6th up, we will be teaching kids to know what the signs are. And, you know, as Brooke mentioned with school culture, we've probably all heard our students say something like, oh, I just want to die, or I'm going to, you know, even we hear at the elementary level, I'm going to kill so-and-so sometimes. And so one of the things we're going to do through this program is really look at language and help our students understand those aren't words to use when we're frustrated or we're mad or we're sad or whatever. And then, you know, move on to really teaching them about, you know, when somebody uses words like this, they're feeling hopeless, they're feeling helpless, they need help. And again, their only job is to let an adult know. So they're going to learn the warning signs. They're going to also learn that just because someone, you know, is withdrawing doesn't mean they're at risk. But if there's a pattern and many of these signs are evident, then we want them to come and tell us, and we want to support them with that. So also, it's important to mention, and you're going to hear about this in a little bit, obviously all the teachers are going to be trained as well in this program, and it's very easy to use. All the materials you can actually check out online what they have available, and then also we'll be sharing with parents too as we implement this. So this is a really important concept that probably a lot of us talk about with our children. And in fact, I just read a book called Tattle Tongue at Bridgeport the other day. They were really worried because the tattle tongue is yellow with big purple dots and it's not very attractive. But telling is important. So we are definitely going to be emphasizing this with our students, just helping them to recognize, as Brooke mentioned too, online, you know, when you hear something, when is the time that you need to get off the phone and go, you know, go get help. Also is really, happy to hear Rob mention the state anonymous tip line. We have that in Colorado, and it was called Safe to Tell, and it was an incredibly useful, protective, powerful resource.
How did you advertise that?
So in every school, we had posters, and we taught the kids. I mean, we'd say something, and at other times, so students all knew, and students used it, and parents helped. So we have a slide here for parents, but I think as Brooke mentioned, it's important to listen, but also to ask the questions and to prepare. Because when we're in our amygdala, we don't really know, you know, we're just reacting. We don't do our best job. So part of what this program does is really help us to work with our students to say, oh yeah, when this kind of thing happens, this is what I'm going to do. So one of the most important things, you know, I mentioned belonging is, and this is going to happen through Say Something, is just making sure every student has a trusted adult at home and at school. So every student will be doing that. They'll learn the warning signs. We always talk about being an upstander and, you know, stepping in and doing what's right. So that will definitely be part of what we do. And then we'll do, you know, we don't know exactly yet because we really want the students to lead this, but there's all kinds of activities and community events that we can do. So first off, we're going to have students lead, so we'll have the high school students come out to the middle school and likely the 5th and 6th grades. We're going to have students own this. And as I mentioned at the middle school where I was, I mean, 8th graders led this whole program. I actually think our 6th graders can do it, but we're not doing that yet. So there will be displays, there will be messaging, there will be just many ways for kids to interact with these important messages.
And also something that we're going to be doing with Elizabeth is I run a peer leader program, and it's juniors will be bringing 8th graders into the school in the spring and May and helping them adjust. And then in the spring, Elizabeth is going to come in and we're going to train them together in how to roll this program out with the 9th graders. So culturally building it as soon as they come in. Also, I think we're going to look to collaborate with the MAC students on what they're doing. So we certainly don't want to overlap programs, but Hope Happens Here is the name of the program that MAC's starting, with some pretty strong voices, and students have a really good pulse on what's going on in our building. And again, making sure that we do this collaboratively with the different groups that we have, and we have ideas about bringing in student council, working with coaches, so they're also sending the same messages. And again, we have a great opportunity with our advisory system, where with our new IB schedule, it's going to be a different way that students are connecting with that adult at the high school. And MOMS has it really well established, and something that we'll continue to build.
So these are the two primary ways that we envision parents participating in this program. The first, as we've been saying all along, that we need to be talking about it, even though it's hard to talk about. It's hard to say, we had a scary thing happen at Mom's. It's actually, talking about it helps. And so first, making sure your child knows who they can talk to at school, letting them know that no matter what, you're going to help them to communicate, to get the, get whatever needs are met. And I mean, this goes along with everything that we know as parents, whether it's, being faced with vaping or drinking or, school performance, that we're just having open dialogue. And then just making those family agreements that we will say something together, and, the kind of when then kind of situation, so that your student knows what to do. And then intervening, and probably some of us have experience with that. I know I've done this many times, and just getting the help for the student that might be in crisis, and again, back up to culture. When we are agreeing as a community to be doing this, then we all can feel like, yeah, this is okay. The other parents know we're doing this, on parent to parent, parent to child, teacher to child. So those would be.
Just something you need to think of too is that students are doing this all the time at the high school level. They are, and I started off that way, and they are super proactive. And if they see something on Instagram or on a social media feed, and they're concerned enough, they definitely come forward. And if somebody, a student said this to me the other day, which is one of those things that we have to figure out a way to improve our communication around it and our care for one another. But they were saying, Brooke, it's almost like so many people are in pain that they're making it into a meme. They're making it a joke about how depressed they are or how anxious they are, because they don't really know what to do with it. And the student said something to me the other day, and there were lots of students around him when he said it, and it was a pretty dark thought, and everybody laughed around him. And I was like, so he's serious. This isn't funny. He's serious. And he's like, yeah, I'm serious. And he's been saying these things over and over again. But he's like, I need help, right? I need people to listen to me. And so I think that helping our students listen to what we're saying and not minimizing it as a joke or someone else is going to take care of it, but that we are all in this together. We are all this caring community, and we have a great foundation on which to start.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so what we would like to do right now is within our tables, and before you move, because if you're at a small table, I'm going to ask you to move so that you're at least 7 or 8 at a table, but hold on. We're going to take about 20 minutes, and at each table we will have one of our administrators, or Elizabeth and or Brooke, at a table, and they will be taking notes as your table has conversations around the 3 questions up here, which I'll read in a minute, and then any questions that may come out. So the 3 questions that we would like for you to discuss at your table are: 1, how can we as a community help our students feel safe in their schools? And we'll leave these up. The second is, what additional information would you like to know about ALICE, Say Something, or any of the ACSD protocols? And the final question is, how would you like to receive this information? We have people who want everything on email, people who want it on the website, people who want information sent home. So to get a better understanding for how you would like this. And we will also, after tonight and after some questions have been posed, we will discuss it internally. We will get a safety page up on our website so that you'll have the resources there as well. So please take 1 or 2 minutes to, if you're in a group or you're at a table of less than 6 or 7, please move with another table, and we'll come around with paper and pencil for facilitators.